So there's a new brief story out of Brazil Wire. Brian Mayer, who's been on Left Reckoning, and we'll get him on Majority Report at some point, I think, has a new article, Greenwald's embarrassing public spat with Brazilian Union. And Bradley, if you want to put this up for folks, I think people should read it. But this is, I think, characteristic of I would call I think I've been in arguments with Glenn Greenwald most recently about Jimmy Dore. Glenn didn't want to say whether he endorses Jimmy Dore's views on vaccines, but he didn't want to call me a hypocrite for...
he also was fighting with Sam over just like a clear joke and didn't want to address any of the substance about the vaccine stuff, but whether or not Sam was being sarcastic or not.
And look, it's one thing to like go after YouTubers and that sort of thing. Go after people who are Twitch people for implying that Michael Tracy doesn't get it often. But I do want to say that going after unions is a little bit of a different grade. So here's what Brian Mayer writes. It all started on the Flow podcast, sitting with his husband, Glenn. David Miranda, one of 10 members of Brazilian Congress from PSOL, the Brazilian Socialism and Feminism Party, announced they had convinced U.S. tech billionaire Jack Dorsey, I believe. I think this is Jack Dorsey.
We also should say it's a different level when Glenn is fighting or has crossed a bridge with the left in Brazil, as opposed to the cultural critiques of the left in the United States. The
right-wing Glenn hasn't made his appearance on Glenn's Portuguese language tweets until, I guess, maybe this moment now. So Jack Dorsey to donate 1.2 million towards the renovation of public sports facility in I can't pronounce that, the Rio de Janeiro favela where Miranda grew up. Greenwald then announced that they were looking for donations for similar projects in the South Zone favelas of Vidigal and Rochina. It was important, Miranda added. Now, this is where it gets tricky. It was important, Miranda added, because, quote, we can't depend on the state to do this. It isn't doing it. On Twitter, PSOL-affiliated Marxist history professor Humberto Matos said it was troubling to see the U.S. libertarian billionaire sponsoring a congressman from a socialist party. Glenn responded, asking why it was worrying that David got unrestricted funding to renovate public structures in the favela where he grew up, where family members still live. Would it be better to leave them without resources, he said. That is also troubling. Of course, we know that's troubling. Then I think this is the point that, of course, everyone on the left would make, a socialist. Glenn claims to be familiar with some. Then Sin de Petro ES, the Espirito Santo State Petroleum Workers Union jumped in. What is really worrying is to see David justifying this on Flow with the idea that you can't rely on the state for social transformation. To see a federal congressman use such a depoliticized line of thinking borders on the ridiculous. Why is he a congressman then? And then Greenwald said the fact is that the state is ignoring the residents of the favela. That is not the issue there. The issue is that this extra idea, as the person said, because Glenn's going to say, you're too focused on philosophy. Well, why is the philosophy of you cannot rely on the state to do this in there at all? Because that's why Jack Dorsey and these Bitcoin freaks want to make these donations, is to send that. That's the message that they want to send with these donations. So anyway, Glenn says, the fact that is that the state is ignoring the residents of the favela. David's mandate is to pressure them to do more, but is grotesque and immoral. So now we're at grotesque and immoral. So we're really getting moralized language to not do everything you can to try to improve the community, especially the one you grew up in. It's easy to say you don't care. Cinda Petro ES answered, this isn't the issue, Glenn. The issue is you trying to justify a personal action with depoliticized rhetoric that shows David doesn't have any real perspective of anti-capitalist transformation of society, which is PSOL's mission. Glenn, I'm going to read a lot of this because I think Brian Mayer, and people should check out the Brazil Wire post here, but Brian, I like Brian's editorializing. I appreciate it. Then Glenn, who allegedly made 2,500 times the Brazilian minimum wage while working for tech billionaire Pierre Omidyar at The Intercept, tried to pull the Fox News elite leftist card on a labor union representing thousands of petroleum platform workers. I mean, he's only got so many.
He got his wires crossed.
Yeah, exactly.
He was too in like I'm going to critique MSNBC mode, and he forgot that he was in talking to Brazilian.
I think this is lazy pattern recognition.
Right.
Pull the elite leftist card on labor union representing thousands of petroleum workers who earned an average salary of 1.7 times Brazil's Brazilian minimum wage, around about $350 a month, US dollars in 2020. As David explained on Flow, he said, for some privileged leftists, politics is a game. This is really all that Glenn's got for marketing his new fancy platforms. As David explained on Flow, for some privileged leftists, politics is a game to show purity and superiority. For people who grew up like him, it is not an abstraction. His only purpose in politics is to improve the lives of the people, and this is what he is doing. Cinda Pietro answered, "We are qualified to talk about this, Glenn. We work on many partnerships in vulnerable communities. Using the privilege card to bury criticism of political action doesn't stick here. And we know very well that contradictions and dialogue make up an important component of good base level organization." Greenwald answered, "I think the people in the community have the right to decide what they want to improve their lives. It was a group of residents who created this renovation, and they asked us for help to find financing. I worry about their wishes, not your ideological dogma." Cindy Petro ES responds, "You continue trying to change the subject to make it look like criticism is being made of the social project itself, Glenn." Again, this is like this bad faith stuff. It's fine directing that at me or Sam or Binder or Emma, like any YouTuber, fine, even journalists, whatever. That you cannot like make these like have a category distinction between these are people that are actually doing work. You continue trying to change the subject to make it look like the criticism about the social project itself, Glenn. That's not it. The criticism is over the justification used for this project that was made on a communication medium with a large audience, because it was ridiculous to hear this from a federal congressperson from a socialist party. Glenn answered, "I think that the part blah, blah, blah." Glenn saying the same thing. And then just as a final point, this is troubling because the type of idea that the private sector, through its generous donations, is the answer for the morose bureaucracy of the state is basically what right-wing billionaire-funded groups like Renova BR and MBL espouse. It's basically the entire theoretical basis of neoliberalism. LOL. Now, that's the
I like the LOL at the end.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Like, this is laundry for neoliberalism. And Glenn's response is going to be, I don't care so much about labels and stuff like that.
You're
but
too ideological.
You included the ideological claim that you cannot rely on the state here. Like that is what upset these people, and that's what is always going to upset a like Marxist party. Like, right? Like, you can't just like, I mean, I think this is fairly obvious. Binder, you can. I've been talking for a while. I want to hear what you.
To be fair, I think it's his husband, right? David Miranda. I think he's the one who said that, which actually makes it worse, though, because he is an elected official in Brazil. Yes. And
it shows that there's carryover between what Glenn is espousing and with his husband, which we hadn't had evidence of before.
On that point, that's the problem. Let's take Miranda out of this. Glenn and his relationship with Tucker. Who's influencing who there, right? Does it seem like Tucker is becoming more of like the Glenn Greenwald, where he's going after Sam Harris for being Islamophobic? No, that's not what Tucker Carlson's doing. Glenn Greenwald is taking on more Tucker Carlson characteristics. And I've often been like kind of like hands off a little bit on Glenn, because I think there are people in Brazil who really respect his work. But this if it seems like he's trying to put basically Bitcoin libertarian bro BS about the state and how it's impossible, and the only thing we can depend on is Jack Dorsey.
Yeah,
Jack Dorsey is what we should depend on. Please,
private billionaires. I mean, we're like, there's constantly this critique of liberal elites, and yet in the same breath we're going to talk about the reliance on donations of billionaires
literal tech monopolists.
Yeah, I mean that's literal libertarian ideology.
It'll be interesting to see what Jack Dorsey gets out of this, because obviously there is going to be something he gets out of this. He just left Twitter. He is changing the other company that he is the CEO of, Square, into a full-blown blockchain company. They just announced yesterday that they're changing their corporate name from Square to literally Block, to stand for the blockchain, because they're going full-on crypto. They're going full-on crypto. And he's donating all this money to this project in Brazil. We've seen what's going on in El Salvador.
Can I just on this project in Brazil? Do you think he would be making this donation if he couldn't avail of Glenn Greenwald as a marketer for his just the benevolence of his donation? Do you think that relationship is kind of essential here, or did he just pick a favela at random? No, he wants this.
Right, exactly. I mean, even I think Greenwald even said in his tweet, if I recall, he said how people at this favela came to his husband, who's a congressperson in Brazil, and wanted funding, and I don't know if Dave Miranda has Jack Dorsey's telephone number, but it wouldn't surprise me if Glenn Greenwald did. And they hooked up with Jack Dorsey. I mean, Greenwald's working with a number of various different big tech companies, or tech startups, I should say, who have received VC funding. One such company received funding from Peter Thiel recently. And, it wouldn't surprise me if Peter Thiel's got Jack Dorsey's number. So long story short, Glenn Greenwald was a necessary cog in the machine to get Jack Dorsey to donate the money.
And on top of that, he has political influence, as we mentioned. I mean, literally by vis-a-vis his husband. So.
And look, I'd say, fine, figure out a way to take the money. Figure out a way to do it that doesn't contradict everything the party that you're supposed to be representing stands for. Like, that should be basic. And the fact that Glenn's smart enough to know that's the line being crossed here with what was said about you can't rely on the state.
Right.
I think, looking back there, Miranda should have just said, the state isn't doing it, because that would have been just you
could critique the government.
That's just descriptive. It's right. It's not saying it's not obvious libertarian claptrap.
It's not ideological.
Exactly.
What was the exact line again that he used? Because I'm all for taking, if you could convince a millionaire or a billionaire to give you a large batch of money, I'm all for taking it, as long as there's no strings attached or no ideological bent you're promoting for them, or any project of if this is a strict, out of the kindness of his heart, donation, then fine, that's great. But there's probably some sort of string attached. But even with that aside, like you're saying, he got what he wanted out of it, just out of that one line said on that program in Brazil. If anything, he basically said this wouldn't happen without someone like Jack Dorsey. And I'm sure if Jack Dorsey wants to create his own El Salvador, his own Bitcoin beach in Brazil, he'll be able to use this project as proof that he cares about the Brazilian people. And this isn't something he's doing for his own, to line his own pockets or push or promote something that he's monetarily invested in. He'll just claim that, look, I donated this money to this favela because I really care. I mean, we're seeing this happen in El Salvador without any the furnishings that it's out of the kindness of their heart, or we're seeing what's going on there. It's on the streets in El Salvador right now. And, it's not a successful project for the people that this is supposed to help.
Yeah, as quoted by Brian Muir, the quote was, we can't depend on the state to do this. It isn't doing it. Again, the first part of that statement is just not something a leftist party can say. I think that, or that's an ideological claim. So let's just treat it as one and just admit that we got beef here, and that this isn't just trying to do what's best for the community. That's honestly cowardly. Own what you're saying.
Right. To make people understand from obviously, if you can't understand it from this bent, just imagine you, a leftist that you enjoyed here in the States was criticizing the Biden administration and then said, and that's why we have to go to Jeff Bezos for help, because we can't depend on the government. Mm-hmm. You would disagree with that wholeheartedly. You'd say, yes, the Biden administration is dropping the ball here, because this and say, and this is what the government should be doing. This is their job. This is where they are best able to take care of the people. You wouldn't go Medicare for all is not helping. We got to go to Medicare for all is not happening, I should say. The Biden administration's failing on healthcare. So we got to depend on Jeff Bezos to pay for all our healthcare. And that's the way it's going to be. No, but you would mock that idea if this was in the US.
Exactly. This is basically a really elaborate way of disguising the fact that you think philanthropy is the answer.
And then we're talking, okay, this is the ideology of the very liberal elite that is being cited at the start of this conversation.
You won't let the favela savers like Jack Dorsey come in and save everybody.
This is essentially say if I don't want to pick a leftist politician because I'm not as familiar with where Miranda stands relative, but say a member of the squad basically said, and this is why we need to Mike Bloomberg to dump some more money into this foundation, right? I'm kind of rephrasing what you said, Binder, but it's a bit of a I mean, that's
or if
that's the parallel.
Ro Khanna got off on Bitcoin stuff, we'd go after him for it.
Yeah, right.
And he's a Democrat. I don't know, I don't know what yeah. I mean, you can call it purity to not believe that philanthropy is the answer to Rio de Janeiro or any problems. That's just me. They call me a purist, leftist, Marxist, obsessed with purity. I don't think philanthropy of tech people and PayPal billionaires, I don't think that's going to save it. I think they might do a lot for Glenn and his immediate family. Like, I think, go on, get that.
Yes.
To act like that this is going to do anything for society at large is gross.
Honestly, yes. Philanthropy is largely a scam in order for wealthy people to get out of paying their taxes. I'm sorry for coming off ideological. I hope it's not too ideological.
Yeah, stop being a purist for being anti-philanthropist.